My name is Greg Stanley, and I'm Director of Platform Solutions with SmartSimple. I'm a white Irish man in my 30s with brown hair, wearing round glasses, and I'm talking to you today from Hamilton, Ontario, which is about an hour southwest of Toronto. Hamilton is situated on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee and Mississauga's peoples. So again, just like to take the time to thank you all for attending, and of course to the team at Peak for giving me and SmartSimple the opportunity to present. I've got one slide about SmartSimple, and then we'll go into what we're going to be talking today, and that is trust-based philanthropy inside your grants management system. So who are SmartSimple and what we do? Well, really, we're a global provider. We operate worldwide in a number of different vertical markets. So of course, in the traditional grants management market, where you folks all operate, but also in research grants, scholarships, case management, and a whole host of other business process automation and unit tracking elements. So we're worldwide, we're global, nearly 250,000 monthly active users, 450 clients, and success there with many different agencies. Some things that we really pride ourselves on is our comprehensive support and general client satisfaction. So high server uprates, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, critical support. We're getting the show back on the road, as they say, in the new year. And we'll be hosting our user groups, client trade shows, and our annual conference, of course, as well. Just on our road shows, myself, I'll be attending TAG in San Antonio in a couple of weeks' time, as will my colleagues, Todd Lapham and Gary Modlin. So if anybody does want to pop by and say hi to us at the booth, it would be great. And we are hoping to host a social event there as well. So some more details to follow if anybody wants to reach out to me. So what we're here to talk about today, of course, is the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project, and how you folks can incorporate the ideas behind trust-based philanthropy into your day-to-day workings within your grants management system. I'm not an expert in trust-based philanthropy, so I'm not going to pretend to be. I'm going to leave that to the people at the project themselves. And that's where I've taken this beautiful slide from, and their link, of course, is on the screen. So there's four prongs there, or four points to their guiding star, as they like to say. And where the GMS providers can really slot in is through the structures piece, using your GMS to implement the practices that you've defined. So making sure that all of those key elements and key learnings and all of those changes in the culture and in the leadership, and bringing everything together into those practices to really make things a little bit easier and a little bit more equitable for your grantees and for your stakeholders. So what we're going to be looking at are really 5 things in no particular order, no particular priority, but 5 kind of elements that I've seen and that we've seen at SmartSimple as a GMS provider that clients are using to kind of implement and encourage the adoption of trust-based philanthropy. We're going to go through these kind of one by one. I've got a couple of slides on each with some examples from our platform. And then towards the end, I'm hoping that we can get a little bit more of a discussion involved. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you folks are seeing. So to start with, the first thing that I like to talk about are intake forms, or an expression of interest stage, or an LOI stage within your application process. So there's 2 kind of elements to this. The first is really going to be before a user or an organization even gets involved with your organization, right? Before they've created an account, before you've invited them to apply, giving them the ability to create or submit an expression of interest that they may want to work with you. The reason that this is useful is that you probably work with the same organizations year after year, but every single day there's brand new grantee and brand new nonprofits starting up to fill those gaps that are there in society. So you don't really want to miss out on those opportunities to work with those new organizations. So although you may not be facilitating or operating opening programs now, giving nonprofits the ability to reach out to you in a manner that has a low barrier of entry, that provides you with the essential information that you need to make a decision to maybe bring them into the fold later on, is a really, really useful tool. on top of that, then it means that you're broadening your net, right? So you're allowing that, you're being approachable, you're being that little bit more equitable, and providing those opportunities to engage further. Now, at this particular point, there may not be, as I said, a registration process. All we're doing is looking for the bare necessities. Very, very simple organizational information and contact information, as well as a small piece of narrative. Really, we just want to get that submission in and review it nice and quickly and nice and simply. We're only capturing, as I said, essential information. Why is the organization a good fit? Why should we work with you? What is the work that you're doing? Other options that you can include in a form like this, could be simple social media links, direct us to your other materials, attach, maybe some of your previous documentation that you've shared. Again, leveraging and taking on board all of those key points from trust-based philanthropy, and allowing users to submit what they already have, rather than trying to make them conform to what you want from them. What this also does then is, having these simple entry points, is from a long-standing point of view, it gives you visibility on how you actually came to work with an organization in the first place. All right, so you have a historical record of how the organization came to you, the rationale in this case for working with the organization, and also who was responsible for that relationship to start with. So you can see that full relationship grow from that initial entry point all the way through to your 5-year, multi-year operating funding that you've granted them recently. On top of these kind of things, outside of after maybe you've started working with an organization, if you do need an LOI stage, keep these things simple, right? Allow users to submit their own materials, allow them to answer very general questions, keep the language simple, keep it clear, and include tooltips and instructions along the way. All about reducing, again, that barrier to entry. So following on from that, and kind of working together at the same time, is the idea of accommodating users with simplified application forms and reporting mechanisms. So every single minute that a nonprofit is spending completing out a narrative or a 16-page application form, or building out a budget report or a project budget, is time that they're taking themselves away from the good work that they're going to be doing in their communities. So again, trying to embrace the different formats that are available in the modern world, that we can accommodate these kind of reports. So, for example, what we've seen is, within the application processes, streamlining organization profiles and pre-populating certain elements of application forms with data that already exists. So we'll talk about, integrating with third parties further on, but even simple things like pre-populating answers to some questions. Maybe it's a drop-down form or field on your application. Has there been any, financial irregularities found in your organization in previous audits? Why don't you pre-populate that answer with no, rather than putting a select one in place? It's a couple of seconds here or there, but if the user doesn't have to go in, change that answer, or maybe complete an additional drop-down narrative field, all of those seconds that they're completing, they all add up into additional time. Like that, then, from a reporting point of view, embracing the technology. So thinking outside of long narrative reporting forms, maybe you handle a report as a phone call. Maybe you go on site and get shown around the office and discuss what the organization you're working with is actually doing, asking those questions, and maybe taking a little bit of that burden back onto yourselves. So for a long time, you shift that burden back to the grantee, but maybe taking some of that back into your own organization's fold as well. Using things like video interviews, for example, right? Allowing the nonprofit to record their own videos and upload it so that you can break that down directly. Maybe they submit their own budget form, right? If it's a project that they're working on that you're funding, maybe you're not supporting them with operating funding, allow them to submit their own budget sheet, right? Because they will have done that themselves. They're going to be doing all of that accounting themselves, to make sure that they're not over allocating or overspending or overspending their budget, right? So allowing them to submit those materials themselves, again, just saving that time. Simple example here of a simplified application form, or the first stage of an application form. You can see we have a whole host of fields already pre-populated. And all we're asking is for a position title, and as well as that, if the mailing address is different. So we're assuming here that the information that we have is accurate and up to date. And if for whatever reason it's changed, then the user can make the decision to step in and update that information themselves. And likewise here in our simplified report, we're not capturing a huge amount of narrative. We've pre-populated, the application name, the person that submitted it, the due dates, and all of that kind of stuff. A couple of sentences around explaining what's essentially being uploaded as part of this progress report. So we have some simple documentation that users that the user has submitted that makes sense. And then like that, we've got a nice little video that the individual has uploaded as well around the particular report. So making use of all of the functionality that GMS providers offer, to make things easier for your grantees. And that brings us in nicely to the next slide. Again, I mentioned this briefly, making use of all of the publicly available data that's there. So if it is, US state or federal level entities or other international jurisdictions, if there's any international grant makers on the line, there are databases with all of this information available. Some, if it means that you have to go and search and find it out and enter that information into organizational profiles. Again, it means that the organization themselves doesn't have to complete that information every single time they're applying for funding. They may be applying to you right now, but you can be sure that they've applied to a handful of other or many other organizations as well at the same time. And every time that they have to complete that same information, again, it's just time taken away from them working with their communities. So of course, as GMS providers, we have integrations with a lot of these third parties as well. So from SmartSimple side, all of those listed on the current slide are integrations that work well within our platform. So we can populate the data within organizational profiles and other elements, perform automated scanning and due diligence tasks with some of these third parties that are doing that work. And again, on top of that, if we're leveraging these kind of integrations, it allows us to get that historical look at the organization as well. So on our example here, we can actually see the change over time when this organization has been vetted. So when we've run our due diligence scans, we have the charity check by Candid and GuideStar record static there. So again, the organization is keeping their profile in Candid or in GuideStar up to date. We just pull that information in then as we need it. Again, reducing that burden on the grantee organizations and on that nonprofit is probably the key point in all of these slides that I'm going through. On top of how you actually work with it, on top of how you work with the grantees, obviously giving them long-term funding and long-term support, right? Multi-year operating grants rather than project-specific grants. In my previous life, I actually worked with an organization that unfortunately went under because all of the work that they were doing was supported, was all project-based. And unfortunately, they had to allocate certain elements of their operating work into the project budgets. So they were constantly just running projects for the sake of running projects, rather than actually taking a long-term look at the organization, the health of the organization. So allowing organizations to spend the funds that you give them as they see fit is a big step in that right direction. Obviously, as well, it supports the stability of those organizations because they don't need to reapply for funding every single year. And they're not just running, as I said, projects for the sake of it, right? It also shows an awful lot of trust and, in the relationship. It shows that you're committed to it. You're not just in this for this one transaction. It's a long-term investment on your particular side. So putting that trust back in the organization as well to complete that and to spend the money how they see fit, of course, is important. And then like that, by default, it reduces the administrative burden, right? The organization doesn't have to keep applying to you or renewing grants if you're just supporting them for 3 or 5 years or even longer. And like that, if you do, for whatever reason, need to renew an operating grant, keep it simple. Again, pre-populate the organizational profile, some of the data from the previous application forms. I can't speak for other GMS providers, but SmartSimple has a function within the platform to allow users to copy a previous application form and resubmit it. All right, so simple things like that allowing users to leverage what they've already completed and submit that materials back to you then for your initial review and your initial decision. Again, a simple screenshot here of, I'm sure everybody's familiar with application forms, but just those key pieces of the request, an operating grant with those long-term dates over multiple years. And in this particular case, this is more for you folks internally and keeping track of the impact that you're making more so outside of an individual grant, right? You folks all work with your nonprofits again for the long term. So it's all about building and maintaining that relationship and keeping the show on the road with them, right? So how you provide additional services or additional security around or to the nonprofit is key for you in keeping track of the impact that you are making, right? So leveraging the functionality again within a grants management system to keep track of elements outside of the grant, right? Or beyond the check, as the project calls it. So some of those things, of course, can involve consulting, training, general workshops, collaborative marketing campaigns, or even simple things like handling introductions from your side to other funders in your network, right? And all of those things are very, very valuable. And it's, value from your time, from your staff's time. It could be professional services that you're providing. You could be preparing financial statements for a nonprofit for a week. You could be consulting on best practices on how to restructure specific programs. All of that is time and effort on your side that provides a value and commitment again to that relationship and falls into the ideas behind the trust-based philanthropy project. So again, within SmartSimple, because of the configurable nature of the platform, we can configure elements like that to the specific needs of your organization. So, for example, in our fictitious scenario here, we've got hours committed and we've got dollar values attributed to those particular elements. So the marketing, the consulting, and the professional services. It allows you to get that full picture of the work that you do with the organization, again, outside of the grant applications, but the full engagement that you have with that nonprofit. And when you get all of the data in, that's when you can really do all of the fun visualizations and impact reporting that you want to see. Once your data is structured in a way that you can work with and you can manipulate, you can get all of that value and all of the data back out again. And sometimes, it does mean that you take some of that on yourselves, like that. You are, in this case, the individual staff in this particular screenshot, they're the ones that are completing these particular records. So they're specifying what they've done as part of this particular engagement. The same is true maybe for a site visit or a site visit report. Maybe you need to extract some of the information from that and populate it into fields manually, where that would have been done with grantees in the past. So, it is important that you get the impact assessments back out of the work that you do with the grantees, but like that, doing it in a way that's equitable, and not taking up too much time from your nonprofit partners in the field.